This article in particular really got me stir crazy. So we've been talking about, the temporary firm workers, how corporations, private equity firms, NGOs have all kind of shared their play when it comes to exploiting the open door policy, immigration, mass migration into Canada to bring in more people that they can exploit for cheap labor, that's undermining the Canadian workforce, that's causing high unemployment rates and disruption of services and whatnot. And we've exposed this time and time over again from contributors like Tim Hortons with their private equity firm, Restaurant Brands International, to just the Canadian government, going toe to toe with the Century Initiative, which is an NGO pushed by people like Mark Weissman, who used to be a former executive of BlackRock, telling people you got to brace yourself because Canada needs a population of 100 million people by the end of the century. That's apparently what this NGO is responsible for. And what they don't tell you, it's also in coordination with big companies that are exploiting the process to bringing as many undocumented immigrants into the country to exploit them for cheap labor. And this article makes me a little stir crazy because instead of actually exploring the state of the system and investigating the problems with vetting in this many people, City News is going to point the finger at you. It's your fault, apparently. Because according to their research, says nearly half of immigrants say temporary foreign workers fill the jobs Canadians don't want. Oh, that's it. It's just Canadians are just lazy. They don't want to flip burgers. They don't want to go to McDonald's. All these young Canadians that are finished school and just want to earn a few bucks so they can, start the workforce. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. So that's why we got to bring in a bunch of stragglers from foreign countries and replace them. Because, it's the Canadians' fault. It's the average citizen's fault because they just don't want to, get their hands dirty. I don't know if they're aware we lived in a world where Mike Rowe, remember Dirty Jobs on Discovery Channel? Remember you used to watch it in science class. I don't know why. Maybe. I think it's because we had a supply teacher and there was nothing else to do. But that show really proved that people can do anything. People will do anything if the price is right. So having this article demonizing Canadians, saying that, oh, it's just the jobs that Canadians don't want to do. Just so bad. It's so bad and so insulting that, oh, unemployment's a wreck and industries are collapsing because Canadians don't want to do those jobs. Canadians don't want to earn a decent paycheck and make a living and be able to afford the country. That's their choice. That's why we got to bring in a bunch of migrants and exploit them to no end. So Diana Donnett looks at the construction site where her house once stood across the street from a restaurant. She's not sure whether some of the construction workers she sees are here on temporary visas. I think some of them are, the ones that are helping the contractors. Her house burnt down in a fire that ravaged the community of Jasper, Alberta in July 2024, but she didn't lose the restaurant that she just opened the year before. That was part of the massive blaze in Jasper that still is being investigated, that we still don't know exactly what happened. And, people are getting suspicious, let's just say. Temporary foreign workers, they work hard, they commit to their jobs, she says. As a former temporary worker herself, they help businesses in Jasper, like in the restaurants. The Rocky Mountain town relies heavily on foreign workers, especially during the busy summer season, when up to 3,000 seasonal employees are required. Joseph Francisco says tourists flocked back to Jasper soon after last year's devastating wildfires, keeping businesses afloat. But while he's been busy working as a cook for a couple of restaurants in town, sometimes he gets lonely. I tried to move here in Canada to bring my family here, he says, adding that he hasn't hugged his daughter in almost 4 years. Times are getting tough nowadays. The federal government is aiming to slash Canada's temporary resident population, promising additional changes to the temporary foreign worker program, which requires employers to submit a labor market impact assessments before they can hire a foreign worker. Now, the thing about that is, we covered this before, there's been fraudulent cases where larger corporations, not, mom and pop restaurants, but larger companies have made fraudulent documents to get them legal exemption for hired temporary foreign workers. So this is why something like this that they claim is going to benefit communities isn't actually beneficial, because you're not actually going after the biggest abusers. You're not going after the Tim Hortons, the Subways, the Burger King, the McDonald's, the Walmarts, the, big chain stores that constantly make these fraudulent claims that they need temporary foreign workers when the truth of the matter is they don't want to actually hire Canadians. They don't want to hire someone with a decent wage. That's all about. It's about suppressing wages. It's about suppressing the workforce. Ottawa already tweaked the program, for example, by imposing caps in regions with high unemployment and limiting the percentage of temporary foreign workers that can make up an employer's workforce. However, as unemployment remains high, particularly among younger Canadians, the debate around the impact of temporary foreign workers continues. But as newcomers weigh in, their thoughts on the program are split. A recent poll conducted by Ledger exclusively for Omni News found that 36% of immigrants believe temporary foreign workers are taking jobs away from young people, while 47% say the program helps fill jobs many Canadians don't want to do. But so you're telling me that it's, again, they're trying to frame this in a way that divides people, that segregates people. They're trying to do this in a way that, it's your fault. It's your fault because that youngster apparently just doesn't want to flip burgers or serve coffee at a Starbucks barista. So we're going to get a temporary foreign worker to replace that person because it's their fault. Not the company's fault. It's never the employer's fault that personally gives themselves legality, goes through the loopholes. They exploit this crisis to no end. It's never their fault. It's you. It's you. Because God forbid paying someone a decent wage to do a decent job that could actually sustain a young person going to the workforce, we can never do that. Catherine Connolly, professor and business research chair at McMaster University, says there are many misconceptions about the temporary foreign worker program, but the program has changed significantly over the past few months, and many companies are no longer able to hire foreign workers for low-wage jobs. That's why there you go. That's why they're doing that. They keep telling you that, it's because, they're not qualified, they're not skilled, we can't train people. They want to keep blaming you for the problems that they are attributing to. Because anyone can be trained for anything. Anyone can learn skills on a job. Anyone can learn skills while they're working. When I first started entering the workforce, my first job was helping a contractor. I didn't know many things about the program. I didn't know anything about how to be, a contractor's assistant. And I learned through the job. I also worked in a retail setting. I didn't know anything about retail, but I learned on the job. You obtain skills while you're working. You get trained on the job site. That's what it's always been. So this idea that young people can't be employed, that they're incapable of doing tasks, and we don't want to hire them, is nonsense. You don't want to hire them because you don't want to pay them and actually be responsible for maintaining a good employee. You want to get a temporary foreign worker, they could treat them like crap, give them a low-wage job, and then tell them to shut up because you'll give them a spot at a hotel for a couple days. According to the Omni Ledger poll, a majority of newcomers think Ottawa should only allow temporary foreign workers in specific sectors of the economy or in areas where unemployment is low. But Connolly argues that fine-tuning the TFWP is not a realistic approach. Labor markets move much more quickly than the government could ever hope to, he explains. It's unlikely that the government would be able to keep up with those changes. Really? It's not the corporations are exploiting the government, because as we saw with Mark Carney, he defended the temporary foreign worker program, saying that these companies have two priorities: the trade and access to cheap labor. And that doesn't seem like the government's disconnected from the companies. So I don't get that sense that, oh, it's the governments that are being slow. No, it sounds like the governments are coordinating with these private companies and these equity firms to screw over the workforce. Irene, how do you say that? Irene Blomard, the co-director of the Center for Migration Studies at the University of British Columbia, says another common misconception is that all foreign workers in Canada are there under the temporary foreign worker program, when in reality, there are a number of ways for temporary residents to live and work here. If the temporary foreign worker program was canceled tomorrow, there would still be hundreds of thousands of people with temporary work visas in Canada, she tells Omni. Since 2023, Marco Calabretta has been working as a technician for a Montreal company through a program called International Experience Canada. He tells Omni News that after 2 years at the job, his co-workers are like a second family. But he plans to continue to build a life in Canada and have been upended by recent changes to work permits at the provincial and federal levels. Everyone hopes I stay, he says. They are trying to do everything to help me. The Omni Ledger survey found that immigrants are evenly split over whether to keep the temporary foreign worker program as long as it is, or to end it altogether. Federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre has called on Ottawa to scrap it entirely and instead create a standalone program for legitimately difficult to fill agricultural labor. But Beaumont believes that reducing the number of temporary pathways for immigrants should mean going back to a system where coming to Canada is a long-term investment for both the country and the newcomer. It's not very fair to think that we are just bringing in people for our economic growth and then treat them like robots in a factory, she tells Omni. But that's what the federal government's doing. That's what they're doing. Mark Miller said on a CBC News radio podcast that the whole intention of this is to boost the economy, because they shut everything down during COVID. Canada was losing a bunch of money, so they brought in a bunch of migrants to fill in the positions after telling everybody they got laid off during COVID. That's what all this is about. They're bringing cheap labor to replace you. And eventually, the cheap labor is going to be replaced because AI is going to take over and displace them. And they're going to be part of the problem. So, I don't blame migrants. I don't blame immigrants. I don't blame immigration. Immigration works well when it has checks and balances. I'm very pro-immigrant. But this is nonsense. This is nonsense. When you have companies purposely filing these phony documents for temporary foreign workers that they're desperately in need of employees, when they're not reaching out to people to hire them, and making falsified documents so they can get cheap labor backed by the government. This is nonsense. This is why people are upset. They're not angry at immigration. They're not angry that immigrants are coming to the country. They're angry that the system is exploiting. They're angry that this open borders policy and flooding in people to take the jobs away from eligible Canadians is impacting the entire nation. That younger people can't even flip burgers at a fast food joint because the fast food company decided that we're not going to hire people within the country. We're going to hire outsiders and cheat them worse than dirt. That's what all this is about. It's not, oh, Canadians are just lazy and they don't want to do. No. It's the fact that companies don't want to pay decent wages and treat people like an actual employee. That's what they're doing here. And I would have thought City News would have pulled that together, but maybe they're just trying to, cozy up to the establishment, maybe give some leverage to the Mark Carney government. Maybe they want another bailout for the media. So here's Pierre Poilievre showing that as a decade ago, Carney testified that the Canadian temporary foreign workers prevented Canadian workers from getting raises. Now he says it's okay because corporate lobbyists prefer cheaper labor. So Carney once said that bringing in more migrants to replace Canadian workers is preventing Canadian workers from getting raises. And that is exactly what's happening. It's going against it's going against the Canadian workforce. So they can't get raises. It segregates them. It becomes more divisional. So they can't organize. They can't protest. They can't form unions. And this is all part of it. And Pierre Poilievre is going to remind us that Mark Carney, once upon a time, fought for Canadian workers until he got position of power. Until he got his head in with the WEF, with the billionaire class, with the Century Initiative like Mark Weissman, that are purposely undermining Canadian workers every single day. Listen to this.
One doesn't want an over-reliance, certainly on temporary foreign workers for lower-skilled jobs, which prevent the wage adjustment mechanism from both improving, making sure that Canadians are paid higher wages, but also that the firms improve their productivity as is necessary. So we don't want to mask it, and as the government's review and as the intent of the review to ensure that this is used for transition for those higher-skilled gaps that do exist and can hold our economy.
So that was 2013. That was 2013 Mark Carney. That was under the Harper government. That was when he was the governor of the Bank of Canada. And then, fast forward, he becomes the governor of the Bank of England, almost bankrupts their country. He becomes invested more into the WEF. He becomes part of the globalist clan. And now, because he's fully pledged to them instead of Canadians, now listen to his tone on temporary foreign workers.
Part of what we will be discussing, how well the temporary foreign worker program is working and how our overall immigration system is working. When I talk to businesses around the country, particularly in Quebec, but elsewhere across the country, their number one issue is tariffs, and their number two issue is access to temporary foreign workers.
So, here Poilievre says, what changed? You know what changed? He got in bed with the billionaire class. Once you get comfortable in a position of power, this is what happens. A guy who made an argument supporting Canadian workers, saying that these companies that are hiring temporary foreign workers are undermining and suppressing wages of Canadians that are eligible to get these wages. Over time, Mark Carney went to private affairs. He went to work. He became the head of Brookfield and became the governor of the Bank of England and become the co-chair of the Century Initiative, worked with other billionaires, got, in with George Soros and the likes of other, these horrendous people. And that's why we have this sudden change. That's why they're doing this. And I just want to remind people, it's not about whether or not immigration should exist. It's not that conversation. It's we need to restore the checks and balances to have proper immigration. Because immigrants have existed throughout the formation of this country. And once upon a time, every one of us came from somewhere. We all came from somewhere. Unless you're a native Canadian, indigenous to this region, one of us came from somewhere. And you had to go through checks and balances. You had to go through a proper vetting system. That was the case. And that should be the case, because otherwise, if we don't have the checks and balances, if we don't know who's coming in this country, then there's not a point to the country. There's not a point to borders. There's not a point to, cities and towns and limits and nothing matters. Nothing matters without proper vetting, proper border protection, and having the proper documentation to vet in who is allowed in the country and who's not allowed in the country. Because this influx of the population of just randos from God knows where is causing havoc. Causing havoc to the workforce. It's causing havoc to our healthcare and educational systems. It's causing havoc to the criminal courts, because we're seeing a lot more of migrant crimes being committed in this country. And that's because we don't have a proper vetting system to document and to detail if this individual is allowed to be in the country or not. If this is a problematic person, if they have criminal convictions in the past, if they're convicted of multiple offenses, then they should be kicked out. But obviously the government does not care about that. The government is highly invested into corporate functions. And here, this is former Tim Hortons employee saying that not only are franchise owners capitalizing on temporary foreign workers to get subsidized by the feds, but the new employees often speak Hindi instead of either one of our official languages and makes a special booger cheese. Oh, God. That's a graphic mental note there. But so what she's saying here, this reporter for Rebel News is saying, again, what I've been saying all this time. It's the corporations, it's these private equity firms that run places like Tim Hortons that are pressuring more and more of these franchises to hire temporary foreign workers than actual eligible Canadians. And are you going to tell me that young Canadians are not interested in pouring coffee for Tim Hortons for a decent wage? You're going to tell me that they don't want to do that? That's why we got to get temporary foreign workers? Or is it because it's part of the exploitation scam like this?
A 2021 report on temporary foreign workers and the influx of immigration from the federal government that says essentially racism is a problem because people will come in, the managers will, and then they'll hire only their preferred nationality. And you say you saw that firsthand.
Well, yeah, I asked them why you always sit. One of the managers, she explained to me, because they are cheaper to hire. I asked her, what do you mean? She said, because the government pay a little bit for their wages, so it's easier for the owners.
And these.
So that's a former Tim Hortons employee saying that they're discriminating against Canadians to hire more temporary foreign workers because the government's going to subsidize that restaurant. So not only are they going to pay them less than the average Canadian would, but they also get grants from the government. They're capitalizing more. It's more money for their pockets if they go against Canadian workers. That's why this is a problem, folks. This is why people are speaking out. It's not because of racism. It's not because of xenophobia. It's not because people are against immigration. It's because it's an entire exploitation scam that affects everybody. And the people that are doing this deliberately, that should be exposed, that should be held to contempt, that should be criminally prosecuted, are the people that run these facilities like Tim Hortons, like Walmart, like McDonald's, like Burger King. for undermining the system and purposely exploiting for cheap labor. Why do you think the UN, a special rapporteur for the UN, called out Canada saying that they're engaged in modern-day slavery? Canada's involved in modern-day slavery. Why would they say that? That's because that's what this is. They're trying to lower and lower and lower the cost of labor by doing this, and they're also getting kickbacks from the government to promote this.
Locations have different managers, but they all, you say, have the same owner.
Yeah, the same owner, but the same general manager as well. Yeah, one of the time I told one of the managers, I said to one of the employees, he put his fingers in his nose, twisted, and he started making special cheese. He started making the cheese. So, congrats to all the 100 customers, you are eating special cheese. Cheesy.
Yeah, that's another problem there. That's, again, why I've kind of just went away from these kind of fast food chain. Like, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And there's no amount of modernity and transforming the restaurant and making it more classy tied the fact that it's disgusting food. Like, I think the last time I ever stepped foot in a Tim Hortons, I got an iced coffee, and let's just say there was a bit of plastic in the drink. Plastic in the drink. And went to the counter. I showed it to them. I complained. They basically told me that nothing you could do, get lost and deal with it. I said, no, I want the money back. I want a refund. So they gave me, they gave me the change back and just told me to get lost. I was like, well, that's it. That's it. I'm not dealing with you anymore. I'm not dealing with this company. The quality has gone downhill. The customer service has definitely gone downhill. And again, it's all intentional. These private equity firms don't care about these businesses. They just care about making the value of Tim Hortons profitable. Not whether or not the restaurant's actually good. It's just the value of the name Tim Hortons is more profitable than the product. That's why they're doing all this. And here is Harrison Faulkner. He's I believe he was a host on True North. I don't know if he's still doing it or he transitioned to Juno News. I'm not sure where he's at now. But he had a confrontation with Mark Miller, who was the immigration minister at the time. And remember, Mark Miller constantly defended how we need mass migration, how we need to go against and suppress Canadian workers. So he confronted Mark Miller, or I guess it's not him, I guess it was a reporter, confronted Mark Miller and said that BC's immigration rate has increased by 84% over the past 2 years. You're welcoming 10,000 new people every 37 days. 10,000 newcomers almost every month. That is not sustainable. That's not sustainable. And I'm not a math surgeon, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I know simple mathematics, and that doesn't add up. 10,000 new people every month. Do you know how many hospitals you need to create? Do you know how many homes you're going to have to build? Do you know how many schools you're going to have to operate? Do you know how many city services you're going to have to increase? Towns cannot take this. It's simple math. But apparently, to someone like Mark Miller, math is not a strong suit. But he will make up some ridiculous, bogus lie to try to cover this up. Watch.
The government does say that their immigration rate has increased by about 84% over the past 2 years. Premier Eby saying they're welcoming about 10,000 new people to BC every 37 days. Is that not an unsustainable rate for a province like BC when they're saying we're encountering increased issues with homelessness, other social issues? Like, is there more room for the feds to talk with BC, or does BC need to initiate that conversation?
Well, again, let's not confuse apples and oranges. The
larger proportionate amount of people that go to BC are on economic programs that bring capital to British Columbia and to Canada. They pay taxes. They are some of the reasons why the economy of BC is doing so well. Clearly, when there are asylum seekers that come with no money and need resources, both provinces and Canada need to step up. There's also stuff that is entirely within BC's jurisdiction when it comes to international students. They, alongside Ontario, have aggressively recruited international students abroad with some real distortions in the system that they themselves have acknowledged and are reining in.
Let's not compare apples and oranges because, hey, all this undermining we're doing to Canadians, it's bringing in a lot of capital. It's bringing in a lot of capital. You know, think of all the colleges and universities that they're bringing in these foreign students and these fraudulent visas, and they're paying more tuition than the average domestic student. Think of the capital it's getting. Wow. Well, when you put it that way, it doesn't. I guess I should be proud of the fact that average Canadians, younger Canadians, that could have just applied here near Tim Hortons. There's hundreds of thousands of locations across Canada. Can't even get a job. I guess I should really blame them, because they're just too lazy to pour coffee. They don't want to flip burgers. They don't want to work on a construction site, gain some skills and opportunity, and maybe grow and venture out to the world. They don't want that. Don't compare. No, don't apples and oranges this. You know, this is about capital. This is about capital. This is about the donor class getting what they want, exploiting more people, and then I get a blank paycheck for doing a good job. That's how I see it. Oh my God. So it really is disgusting. It really is disgusting. Just how open and exposed all this is. Like, people are well aware about this, and yet they still want to make it a race issue. They still want to make it it's these people that are going against immigrants because they're brown. No, again, we're not anti-immigrant. I'm not anti-immigrant. I am anti-corruption. I am anti-exploitation. I am against trafficking, which, to certain circumstances, really is trafficking. You're bringing in a bunch of stragglers from other countries and promising them a job by screwing over Canadians and taking over their jobs. Like, it's a form of corporate trafficking. And that's why a UN Special Rapporteur presented Canada as forming contemporary modern-day slavery because of this. And you get people like Mark Miller, you get Mark Carney, you get so many other... Oh, well, it's the priority is about, the economy, and then just we need the high skills people. Okay. So why are we not getting high skilled people from, say, China? Why are we not getting high skilled people from Copenhagen? Why are we not getting high skilled people from the United States? Don't they have potential? Don't they have the reasons and knowledge and know-how to, help with our economy? Why is it particularly one specific group of people that we all know why they're doing it, and they're purposely undermining Canadians for that reason? Why? Why are you doing this? And it's because the corporations and the government are exploiting everybody in the process and giving you all the middle finger, and even getting City News to write out that stupid piece to blame people because they just don't want to work. They don't want to work the jobs. They don't want to work the fast food chains or stocking shelves at a grocery store. That's their choice. That's why we got to undermine more and more people and bring in more stragglers from God knows where that we can't vet them. That's why this is happening, because it's your fault, apparently.